Boker Tov. This week in Parashat Terumah, we really start getting into the meat of the different parts of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, which predated the temple. It was the central focal worship place. And Terumah, the actual thing of Terumah, is kind of a donation. So it talks about all of the different items that would be included in building the Mishkan, the metal things, the cloth things. And one interesting side note is we're not actually, welcome back, Isabel, we're not actually able to identify and translate all of the different items. There's one word, I'm blanking off it in Hebrew, but some have translated it as rhino skin, unicorn skin. I think here, even in the source, maybe I took it out as seal skin. But it's clear that every single part of the Mishkan was intentional, perhaps influenced by other temples that other religions had done before, and God wanted the people to use some materials that they knew how to work with. But regardless, the Mishkan, every part of it, what it was made from, how it was put together, the height, the size, the smells, all planned out by God. And because of that intentional nature of every single screw, how many screws, for example, it became clear that there must be some symbolism here. And so the rabbis, as they were working through all of the different commentaries, and we'll see a lot of this in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, they were always looking for the symbolism in all of these rituals, whether the sacrifices or the location of the sacrifice, the time of the sacrifice. So what we're going to do today is actually look at just two brilliant rabbis who look at the nature of the Mishkan and more the overall structure, which is that essentially there was an inner chamber, and inside of that you had the famous menorah, there was an altar inside, the showbread, the chalot, all of these different things, and then in the very center of it all, the Holy of Holies, and the real center was the tablets of the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, inside of the Aron, the Ark, covered by these angels, these kruvim, and then everything kind of goes out from there. And that's what these rabbis are going to pick up on. So Gloria and Leonard, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you first. And Gloria, this first source here is just kind of to set us in the right place. It's just a small selection of how God presents the Mishkan, and the word Mishkan itself is a huge hint that the rabbis pick up on, because it doesn't mean tabernacles, like a weird translation, basically. So Gloria, please, and the Lord.
And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they may take for me an offering. Of every man whose heart maketh him willing, ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them.
And then what I cut out here is the list of this kind of skin and this kind of screw and seal skin, and just all those different things. But they're very important, even though I didn't include them. Please continue.
And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show thee, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the furniture thereof, even so ye shall make it.
Excellent. So it talks here not just about the materials, but all the different, they translate here as furniture. The Hebrew is kelav, from the word kli, which is like a vessel or a tool. But the word kli could be clothing, it could be a hammer, it could be an altar, a spoon. It has so many different meanings, but all of the different items in the Mishkan are significant. There are also three other important words that it includes here. It says ve'asuli, God says ve'asuli, and make for me a mikdash, from the word kodesh, a place which is sanctified, unique, separate from everything else. We translate as holy, but it's much more than that. And the word shachanti, and it says ve'shachanti betocham, and I will dwell like a neighbor. A shchuna is a neighbor, somebody who's living next to you, with you, betocham, amongst them, within them. And then the name of this structure is the Mishkan. So this Mishkan, this dwelling place where God will shachanti dwell, is a place which is sanctified mikdash. But all of these different words the rabbis pick up on, and what they say is, what's the connection between God dwelling amongst us and the choice of all of these different vessels and materials and how it's all structured? Why is it that the holiest part is in the inside? Why is it not on the outside? Why don't they put the Ark of the Covenant on the edge of the camp where everybody's going to come see it? So again, there's no one right answer, and there are dozens of possible ones, but I brought what I felt were two beautiful answers today. So the first one And Leonard, I'll take you. This is from Ramban Nachmanides, who we had a class on the other night, who again is a brilliant rabbi that balances deep mystical, Kabbalistic, symbolic significance with also trying to get an accurate reading of the text. It's not that he will never bring in a midrash, but different from Rashi, he really tries to get at what's happening on the page. But again, when something is deeply symbolic and the Torah doesn't tell you what each thing means, it opens up for this kind of creative interpretation. So Leonard, go ahead. This is Ramban's understanding of the nature of the Mishkan and why it was structured the way it was.
Once God had spoken face to face, telling them the 10 commandments and commanded Israel through Moses. They were holy and worthy, for there is to be a sanctuary in their midst, to rest his divine presence among them. Now, since the main objective of the tabernacle was to be a place for the rest of the divine presence, which was to rest upon the ark, he therefore put the commandment regarding the ark and the ark cover first here, for the ark is primary in importance. He then adjoined to the description of the ark the commandment regarding the table and the menorah, for they, like the ark, are furnishings for the tabernacle and give an indication of the essence of the tabernacle, which was made for housing them. The esoteric significance of the Mishkan is that the glory that rested upon Mount Sinai should rest upon the tabernacle, but in a concealed manner. Thus, the glory that appeared to the people at Mount Sinai remained constantly with Israel in the tabernacle. He would receive the same level of divine communication that was spoken to him at Mount Sinai. And just as it says regarding the giving of the Torah, quote, from the heaven he caused you to hear his voice in order to teach you, and on earth he showed you his great fire, unquote. So too regarding the tabernacle, it is written, quote, he heard the voice speaking to him from atop the cover, from between the two cherubim, and he spoke to him. The voice would come from heaven to above the ark cover and speak to Moshe from there. For every communication with Moses originated in heaven during the day and was heard by Moses from between the two cherubs. The giving of the Torah was through fire. So too, the cherubs were made of gold.
Thank you, Leonard. So what's happening here is Ramban says that the purest form of God communicating with the people was what happened at Mount Sinai, where out of fire, God would speak to the people, or God would send his message through Moshe, and that was the giving of the 10 commandments. But everything, our entire people, our entire history, always leading up to that moment about what happened on Har Sinai. And the Mishkan that was portable, you could put it together, take it apart, take it with you, was meant to be a portable Mount Sinai, because, and perhaps one could suggest that, if God spoke to us at Mount Sinai, and that's where God revealed God's self, why didn't we just stay there? We should have just hung out and built a city around Mount Sinai and talked to God whenever we needed to. But God needed us to continue on our journey into the land of Israel. But God wanted us to keep that inspiration, that power, that moment of Har Sinai. And so the Mishkan is modeled after that. So the 10 commandments, the Ark of the Covenant, the core thing that Moshe got on Har Sinai becomes the center of the Mishkan. And then it simply builds out from there, just like the people stood at the base of the mountain. Because it says earlier in the Torah, when God spoke directly to them, they said, we're terrified, we can't handle it, we need some sort of barrier. We need some sort of levels building up to your greatness. And the Mishkan does the same thing. Why not have the Mishkan as an open concept plan where everything is just there in front of you? Because it's too overwhelming for the people. They need to have levels inching towards that holiness. They need to have boundaries because it's too much to get that close to God. And Moshe too becomes part of this structure of the Mishkan as the prophet. But again, the idea is that we recreate, we bring Har Sinai, we bring Mount Sinai with us wherever we go. And in fact, in the Torah service that we have today, where we carry around the Torah and we sing those words, Vayehi bin Soharon, all of the parts of that service, all of the language are taken from the Israelites in the desert, recreating the getting of the Torah, the traveling with the Mishkan, the traveling of the camps. It's all trying to bring us back closer and closer to the moment of receiving the Torah on Har Sinai. It recognizes we can't get to that spiritual height, but we can symbolically represent it. So Ramban's answer is, why is the Mishkan built the way it is? Because every single component of it somehow reminds us of Mount Sinai, but in a kind of coded, key, secretive way. So you could ask Ramban, can you go through every single screw and animal thing here? And he could probably say, oh, this animal reminds us of the cow, or about this sacrifice, et cetera, like that. But it's all, there's one central theme. And one nice thing he does near the end of his piece, he actually has more verses, is he says that again, on Har Sinai, there was fire in the sky. So what's the fire? What's the bright, shining, orangish, goldish thing that we see through which God speaks is the Kruvim. When you look at fire and you look at bright, shining gold, perhaps they kind of have a similarity. So that is the Ramban's opinion, which again, it's quite beautiful. And because the Torah doesn't tell us otherwise, it leaves the door open for this kind of symbolic interpretation. Now, before we go on to our final source, any thoughts, comments, or questions? Yeah, Jane, I'll unmute you, and then you'll be able to take on the next source as well. You should have to unmute on your side. Go for it, please.
You'll have to refresh my memory.
Yeah.
Couldn't the Kohanim enter the Mishkan?
So they could, so there's different parts of it. There's the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant, and that's only once a year for the high priest. And even then it's harrowing. And then there's an outer chamber where they can go to make there's like an inner altar, like inside of the Mishkan. That's the gold one, that's the menorah, the table where they would put challahs, the showbread, etc. But again, if you go back to Har Sinai, there's one central cave, I guess, where only Moshe could go, but there were other people like Aharon and the elders who went part of the way up the mountain. Okay. So again, it's exactly great that you asked that question, because exactly that symbolism can carry throughout. Now, I don't want to say the fault, but I guess the lacuna, the lack in Ramban's explanation is, again, not everything matches up one to one. Ramban could probably creatively come up with why this kind of skin, the tacha skin, and I think that's the one that they don't know how to translate, but how to understand all of these different things. But his underlying idea that it's supposed to be evocative of that experience is quite powerful. But the next one, which is actually quite well known, and this is one that I had never read inside, but I had heard this idea about what the Mishkan is meant to represent, and it's a lot more than just a single mountain and a single moment. And it's something that ideally could speak to us as well today. So Jane, if you want to take this next source, this is a Rav Chaim of Volozhin, which is a town in Eastern Europe, and he was famous for a number of reasons, including creating a yeshiva there, the Volozhin yeshiva. And in his famous work, Nefesh HaChaim, he explored many Torah topics, and it was often quite esoteric, about a lot of mysticism, et cetera, like that. And you'll see hints of that in his text here. So Jane, please.
For the tabernacle and the holy temple integrated all of the powers and worlds and all the arrangements of holiness, all the buildings and treasuries, upper floors and rooms, and all the holy utensils, all are per an exalted template. And this is what is written in Midrash Tanchuma, that is equal in importance to the creation of the world. And therefore the text wrote about Bezalel, I will fill him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. For with these three items, the worlds were created, as it is written. Hashem with wisdom founded the earth, established the heavens with understanding. Therefore the sages stated that Bezalel knew to combine the letters with which the heavens and earth were created. And therefore a man from the holy nation, who is also comprised of all the structures and processes of creation, he is also the model and plan of the tabernacle and the temple and all its utensils, organized according to the plan of the organs, limbs, and components, and sinews and all its powers. And therefore the Zohar details the entirety of the plans of the tabernacle and its utensils, for they are all hinted at in man, a one-to-one correspondence. For this reason, definitely the focal point of holiness in the holy temple and the appearance in a particular place in the godly presence is man. For if he makes himself as holy as is possible by fulfilling the commandments, then he becomes the actual temple, and within him dwells God. And as they say, and I will dwell within them. It does not say among them, but rather within them. Rather, you should know that the whole point of my intention regarding the physical design of the tabernacle and all its utensils is only to provide a hint for you so that you should see, and then you should do likewise to yourself, that you should in your actions be completely holy and worthy and ready for my godly presence to actually settle within you. This is specifically, and they shall make me a holy temple, and I will dwell within them, that all I show you, the plans of the tabernacle. My entire intention is that you should do the same with yourselves.
Thank you. So I'm going to back up for a moment and talk about 3 different images that he's playing with here. So the entire universe starts with God. God, who is not we don't, at least certainly by the point of the Zohar, God is not understood as a single physical essence, but rather the nature of the universe. But at the core of that is God's will, God's desire, God's wisdom. And out of God's wisdom grew the physical universe. God created the universe, God created the planets, the stars, and everything. So out of that central point, everything grew out in concentric circles and different layers, but God is still at the core center of it all. A human being, even though this doesn't work in terms of you don't think of a sphere, but the core of a human, I think, could be argued as the brain. I've actually heard doctors argue back and forth. What's more important, the heart or the brain? Everyone pretty much says the brain. The brain is the seat of our wisdom. Well, out from the brain grows all of the nerves that go to the other parts of our body that allow us to do things. From the inner layers and the organs to the muscles, and the outer layer being the skins, and of course the bones that connect them all. Well, the third image is the Mishkan, which at the center of it is the Aron HaKodesh, the holy sacred ark that includes the law of God, God's Torah that God created. That is the wisdom that God gave us. And out of that grows the next chamber, which is where we do physical things. We have the altar, the way that we connect with God. And again, it grows out. And the outer layer of the Mishkan, if you were on the outside of the Mishkan, the most outer layer would be skin. So what Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin here and many others have suggested this, including the Midrash he brings, is that the Mishkan is actually symbolic both of the way that man is structured and the universe is structured. But it's not just, oh, we modeled it like if you looked from above, it wouldn't look like a stick figure in the sand. That's not what he means. What he means is that the way that an ideal human is structured is wisdom at the center, and then all of the tools that man needs to function in the world. So too, the Mishkan has the Torah, the wisdom at the center, and then all of the vessels that are there to be used to worship God. So if the Mishkan is being used properly, which is all of the tools, the offerings, lighting of the menorah, baking of bread, all of the Mishkan, the parts of it are being used properly, including the skins, which are used to protect it, bring it glory. If every part of the Mishkan is being used towards the center with the intention and the focus towards worshiping God, towards following God's wisdom, then that place becomes a sacred, special, a mikdash place where God dwells. Well, as the verse said that we read at the Gloria, you read at the beginning, when it says God dwells, Veshachanti, I will dwell, betocham. The letter be in Hebrew means in, usually translated as among them. They'll feel my presence. But it also literally means in them. So what Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin here says is, just as the way the Mishkan is set up at the center with the wisdom in the center and all the tools are serving wisdom, so too if a human being uses all of their different parts, their sinews, their skin, their muscle, all to serve something higher, i.e. living a life of wisdom and serving God, then we also become a kind of walking Mishkan, a place where God dwells. However, if we use the Mishkan to have parties or to serve tray food or just to do horrible things, then it becomes a place of disgrace. Well, what else would Rabbi Chaim Volozhin say about a human being? If a human being is not serving wisdom in their mind, but they're serving other parts of their body, their sexual desire or their appetite or their stomach, then they are not a dwelling place for God. But if they're using those tools, if they're using, they're reproducing and creating children to bring love and kindness and beauty and serving God in this world, then it raises them up and God is within them. If they're eating in their stomach to bring joy and gratitude towards God, then that's using all the tools of the body, all the parts of the body for wisdom. So the idea here is that we focus in and identify what is the most important core of the universe, God. What's the most important core of the Mishkan? The Aron HaKodesh, God's Torah. What's the most important part of a human being? The brain, and more specifically, wisdom, kindness, good actions. And then everything else is a tool that can be used to serve that core or to take away from it. And God will dwell and God's presence will be felt depending on how the tools are being used.